to get back into the interview, Stanton Evans. So McCarthy goes on this barnstorming tour. He goes to Wheeling, West Virginia. He goes to Denver, Salt Lake City, ends up in Nevada, giving this speech where he says that he has a list of 57 card-carrying communists or people who are loyal to the Communist Party.
That's what he said. He said. All his critics say that was false, and that he actually used the number 205, as we were talking about earlier. This then became the subject of an investigation by the U.S. Senate, in which...
let me ask you about that before you get on that, Stan. Yeah. McCarthy comes back to Washington, he goes down to the Senate floor, and he reiterates his charge, right?
He does. Correct.
And then the Congress authorizes an investigation of what?
Of disloyalty in the State Department.
Not of Joe McCarthy.
No.
The question that they're supposed to investigate is whether what McCarthy is claiming.
They're not even. It didn't even say that. It just said that the committee should investigate the question. I'll read the exact words, so which is the best answer to the question. That the I'm bragging. I'm going to do this, and I'm trying to find it.
So McCarthy it does not back down. There's this tremendous outcry that he claimed there's 205 communists or communist sympathizers in the State Department. And of course,
that became the subject of
he is a Republican. There's a Democratic president, Harry Truman, in the White House, right?
Right.
And there's a Democratic-controlled Senate.
Correct.
And he comes back to Washington, goes out on the Senate floor, and he delivers again the speech he gave in Wheeling, West Virginia.
He reads to the Senate what he said was the text of his speech as delivered in Wheeling and in Reno, the two places. But let me, before we go to that, I want to answer the question you asked me before about what they were supposed to be investigating. The Senate resolution that was adopted after McCarthy makes his speech, and they have a big to-do about it, was to appoint a special subcommittee, the Foreign Relations Committee, under Senator Millard Tydings, that was to have conducted a, quote, full and complete investigation as to whether personnel who are disloyal to the United States are or have been employed by the Department of State.
So here at last, all this that we've been talking about, all this information theoretically that the FBI had been collecting, that was in these State Department files that Harry Truman would not let go over to the Congress, here at last is chartered an investigation where the American people can find out that all these things that have been covertly going on inside their government.
Correct.
And Millard Tydings, a quote-unquote conservative Democrat, is put in charge of this. And what do?
Cover it up, big time, lie, misrepresent, deceive in every conceivable way.
Who did they investigate?
They investigated McCarthy. They conducted the backstage. Their investigation of the State Department consisted of asking the State Department for information and then treating it as gospel. That was their investigation of the State Department. The real investigation was their investigation of McCarthy, where they sent agents around trying to prove that he had lied about his speech at Wheeling, trying to prove that that he had misrepresented things in other ways, and that was their main investigation, done in collusion with the State Department, that they were supposed to be investigating.
So really, instead of trying to find out whether somebody in the White House sitting next to the president is a Soviet agent, or someone in a senior position in the Treasury Department is a Soviet agent, or someone in the State Department is a Soviet agent, they wanted to find out whether Joe McCarthy said 57 communists or 205 communists in a speech in Wheeling, West Virginia.
That became the big issue. That issue, by the way, that you brought it back around to that question very correctly. That became the obsessive issue for Senator Tydings, and also for and they worked with the State Department to cook that up. Also for a man named William Benton, who was a senator from Connecticut, who had been in the State Department. Benton, in 1951, the next year, brought charges against McCarthy saying he should be expelled from the Senate for a whole bunch of reasons. But the number one reason was that he had lied about what he said at the speech at Wheeling.
He committed perjury.
Well, it became a charge of perjury, that's right. And Benton and Tidings forever after said that he had committed.
This is some of the stand I think that people who didn't follow politics then and don't know the history yet will see something similar to American politics today. And that it wasn't just that they wanted to knock down McCarthy's argument. They wanted to destroy McCarthy.
Oh, and they were very explicit about that. Total and eternal destruction of McCarthy was the phraseology used. But just to follow up on the Benton brought these charges, which were brought before the Senate Subcommittee on Privileges and Elections, which is a subcommittee, to extend, as far as I know, of the Rules Committee of the Senate, and headed by a man named Guy Gillette, who was a Democratic senator from Iowa. And these charges, 10 of them, were led by the charge of perjury about this speech that McCarthy gave at Wheeling. So the committee, Gillette Committee, then sent investigators up to Wheeling, West Virginia. This is not years later, but the very next year after the speech had happened, 1951, who went around and talked to people who had been at the speech and who had heard McCarthy and came back and said, they filed a great big report, I've got it back there in the back, saying, well, McCarthy's right. McCarthy, pretty clear, did not say 205, and they have this guy Desmond, the reporter, admitting that he took it out of the rough draft, and he never heard McCarthy say it. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I've got whole chapters, devoted to that. So here was the Senate report saying McCarthy was right and Benton was wrong. McCarthy never claimed 205, it was 57, this esoteric inside baseball issue that became the number one charge against McCarthy and is in all these books. Well, this report then disappeared. The report, when the Gillette Committee came time to file its final report, this whole charge just absolutely disappears. It's gone. And the report was never alluded to, the report of the investigators. And
who exonerated Joe McCarthy of this charge of perjury?
Very clearly. I mean, they didn't come out and say exonerate, but they just said, this is what the witnesses say. And so that went into the discard.
It was so persuasive that the Democrats said, we're not going to charge him with perjury.
Correct. They never did. The whole charge just dropped.